Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we're talking storylines. The Eagles have a bye week this week for the NFL playoffs, but they will have a home game in the divisional round. What games do create the best storylines? We're also going to get into the opportunity this young core has in 2022. All that and more on this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcoming Eagles fans to a Thursday edition of the show. I'm Louie DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. And today's episode of Locked On Eagles is presented by Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. It's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Gino is busy this week with draft season already, but the Eagles, they still got a run to make to the Super Bowl divisional round coming up in a week. We got the wild card round, though, to take it easy and see who the Eagles are going to play. Gino, my man, welcome back to the show and welcome back to the playing season still. I'm sure, though, you enjoyed getting a little early start on some prospect talk. Hey, I mean, the Eagles have a top 10 pick this year, too, so I totally understand.
Exciting things happened on Sunday. I watched the finale of that Giants-Eagles game with 4 Eagles scouts. And
you were all loving that performance.
It was a surreal experience to just be there, and everybody just took a sigh of relief afterwards. And we all said, okay, now we can wait a week, and we could see what happens next Sunday. And here we are, Lou. I'm out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I don't have to see any more stars and cowboy hats. I'm back in Philly mode.
Although I don't know if they're going to be proud repping that logo after they wouldn't have won the division anyway because they lost to Sam Howell.
That was a real stat line from Dak Prescott. I continue to have to look at it that he
Are you
went
surprised,
14
though?
for 37
this
in
is
that
January Dallas Cowboys football. I mean,
that's exactly what it is.
This is what they do.
What it is. And we're sitting here getting ready for that run once again, Lou, and things are starting to look up for them, right? Jalen Hurts, the talk was that he still has 2 more weeks before that shoulder gets 100% or close to 100%. That 2-week mark will be right when they play that game. So he should be nearly healthy and ready to go. Yeah, he didn't look perfect in that Giants game, but just having him over Gardner Minshew, it's such an upgrade. Josh Sweat comes back. Jason Kelce is nearly crying in the locker room, talking about how big of an impact it was that he was going to come back. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson looked like a man possessed last Sunday. Lou, the
playing in a new spot, playing in the slot.
Yeah, the veteran leadership mixed with this young core that has so much to prove, while that old regime, the BGs, the Fletcher Cox, they want to go out swinging, man. They want to go out and get another one. How awesome would it be to just ride this out into the sunset for a guy like Brandon Graham?
Right.
This is everything we could have asked for and more. We're sitting here now 20 weeks removed from the start of the season. Is this beyond what you thought could happen this year, Lou? Because for me,
I mean, we knew this was the ultimate ceiling, but I didn't think we'd get here. I did not think they'd be the number 1 seed. I mean, we knew the potential they had, but I didn't think Jalen Hurts would take this step, and I just didn't think everything worked, that Howie Roseman did. I didn't think that Hassan Riddick would have 16 sacks and Kazir White would have 110 tackles and James Bradbury would be one of the best corners in football and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson would lead the league in interceptions. Everything worked in a perfect balance of what you talked about with veterans and the young core. And while I'm so excited to see, I'm so happy for the guys that went through 2020 to come back to the top, like Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, because it's got to be tough, man, when you get used to making these kind of runs and suddenly you're, again, a 4-win football team when you're in your late 30s, I should say, mid 30s, but the late end of your career. That's got to be really hard. So I'm glad that they all stuck it out, stayed in Philly, didn't demand trades like certain players and want out, and now they're, reaping the rewards for that. But at the same time, I'm really excited, to see this young core kind of really start their own championship window, right? And last year was kind of the start because they made the wild card round, but you could tell really nobody was ready for that moment against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the reigning, Super Bowl champions. I'm really excited to see what these guys do in their second try. Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown now in the fold, Miles Sanders and Dallas Goedert, just this young core. It really does feel like, and we've talked about this on the show before, it really feels like this young core is very veteran-like, and they're made for deep playoff runs. I mean, they played at top schools in college, so this isn't, and just the way they're wired, they're Bama, Georgia tough with this leadership and maturity that, I don't think this stage is going to be too big for them. And that starts at quarterback, but it goes across the entire roster, even for the players under 25.
There's this talking point in soccer that is brought up when it comes to the international level. It is called the golden generation. We've probably heard it in U.S. soccer. A young team, a lot of guys coming up. This is the year, right? This is the golden generation.
Right, and before that, there's like the tune-up World Cup. You're like, in 4 years, they're going to be 25. They're going to hit their prime. That's the year to do it. It feels like that's the Eagles this year, for sure, compared to last year.
And that's what the U.S. men's national team was. If you look at the soccer realm, they're very young. They were the youngest team in the World Cup. Yeah, this was the tune-up. When you go back to the early days of Connor McDavid in Edmonton, they were still trying to get it rolling. And the first few playoff runs of Sidney Crosby, they have to get set up
or
for
like
that
Golden
next
State
run.
When they were the 6th seed before they hired Kerr. It was Mark Jackson. They beat the Nuggets in the first round, but they fell in that second round. You're like, okay, they're a year or two away, but you knew it was coming. That's what it felt like for sure.
And this seems to be, I don't want to label it a golden generation, but an opportunity to have a golden generation with what you have in place. Because if you look at 2017, Lou, and I thought it was a great point how you began saying everything went right this year. The Chauncey Gardner-Johnson leading in interceptions, Kaiser White, so on and so forth. Well, that was the same thing that happened in 2017. You sign LeGarrette Blount. He has an all-career type of year coming off of a season with the Patriots that nobody thought he could top. Well, he did just that. You bring in guys like Alshon Jeffrey, who was a perfect fit for that offense, with Torrey Smith as well. And Nelson Aguilar has his best year. And Halapoulivaati Vaitai
was just lightning in a bottle.
It was lightning in a bottle, but that never felt like it was a sustainable type of quote-unquote golden generation, because a lot of those guys surpassed that age limit of what it could take to get there. Right now, you're looking at it. Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Miles Sanders, most of the offensive line, all these guys they're basically kids still. I mean, Lane Johnson's the oldest one if you're looking at the quote-unquote young core, and he's probably on the veteran realm of it all. But those guys, you bring in, I mean, Lou, we drafted a kid in the 2nd round who hasn't even seen the field outside of a couple
the 3rd
snaps.
round. Nakobe Dean has barely played either. Even Jordan Davis can't sniff the field in the second half of the year because of Linval Joseph. So, yeah, I'm totally with you. And, Gino, I think it's really exciting for Jalen Hurts, too, because if you've kind of looked across the league, not just lately, but even like the past decade, at least by year 3, you get at least that first playoff win under your belt. And I feel like that's really important because – maybe sometimes it's unfair, but quarterbacks are weighed by what they do in the postseason. Even if they do everything they can to get a win, if you don't have like Lamar Jackson, for instance, those first few years, even though they were the 1 seed in 2019, he won an MVP. He got blown up by the Titans in the divisional round. He didn't have a playoff win, and he was not good in 2018 against the Chargers. People started to mention, like, is he the James Harden of the, or the Paul George of the NFL, where he chokes in the postseason? That win against Tennessee in his 3rd year was super important. I think you saw Josh Allen. He got his win in year 3. Patrick Mahomes got a win by year 3. Joe Burrow got a win by year 3. Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert this year is going to get that under their belt. Even, for the Eagles, Donovan McNabb got one in year 2. Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, the list goes on and on. It's important for Jalen. Not that one playoff win's enough this year because it's championship or bust. That's the expectations. But, getting that playoff success, that's big for a young core because the longer you go, your year 4, your year 5, that pressure, that monkey on your back, it definitely starts to build.
You want to know what is similar with Jalen Hurts as a couple of those guys that you mentioned?
Yeah.
You mentioned Trevor Lawrence. What is one thing that he won? Well, he won a national title. Sure. Jalen Hurts has won a national title.
Joe Burrow has won a national title. Maybe, just maybe, guys that won big-time college football games are able to translate that into the pros. And I won't even count this against them. Let's say the worst does happen and you don't make it out with a win.
he's still going into year 3 as a starter, Lou. I'm not going to count that first year against him. This is that year 2. Would it be a luxury to get there and absolutely pull out 2 wins and get to the Super Bowl? 100%. But you're not going to put it all on him and fault him and say, he might not be the guy.
And again, I'm not going to say that this is the end of anything if they do blow it. It's going to be a massive disappointment because I expect this team to make the Super Bowl. But I'm with you. The window is open where you don't feel like this is the end. But at the same time, Gino, NFL teams, we know after 2017 what happened. It can change like that. And although this team looks like it has a lot of core pieces for an extended window compared to that run, but at the same time, there are a lot of free agents this year. NFL teams are never the same. And so you want to maximize what we have both agreed is the best team talent-wise in franchise history. You want to maximize that now while you have it in place. Because even your coaching staff, Jonathan Gannon has an interview with Houston. Shane Steichen's getting interviews. Your coaching staff's going to be different. Everything changes with success.
You can never count anything for granted. All of us after 2017 are saying, all right, let's run it. 2018, we're going back to back.
If you go back and listen to me and your pods that entire offseason, we were saying that. I mean, we were talking about repeating, and then in 2019, we were talking about them being favorites again. It changes very fast. It doesn't have to, but again, when a window is there, you want to take advantage.
Yeah, you have to capitalize on it, and you have to come out in this time period over the next few years with a successful track record in the playoffs. And that starts not in the wild card week, Lou. You get a week to rest. You're going into the divisional round.
Right.
Watch all that fun partake this weekend. It is going to be a blast. Some great games we got going on here.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked yesterday on the show about what we might be rooting for who we want the Eagles to play in the divisional round. But I do want to get into what might be the best storylines for a potential divisional round coming up next, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
Before we continue on this edition of LOE, this episode is brought to you by our friends over at betonline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can bet on quite literally everything. You can bet on player props. You can make your own player props. Lou and I made you guys some money over the last 2 calendar years with LOE3. You could be up plus 30 units if you were betting with us. You can always do it by just grabbing your mobile device, go to betonline.net, and bet responsibly. You're going to put in money. You're going to get it out quickly. But as long as you're doing it responsibly and doing it with us here at LOE, you can't go wrong at betonline.net because BetOnline is where the game starts.
And guys, today's Locked On Eagles is also brought to you by our new sponsor we're really excited about. It's the Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of a season, all in this challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline too, even if you don't have Wi-Fi or data. Play on the go as you want to, when you want to. We've had a Locked On League for a few months now. It's been a lot of fun. Get your friends and family involved. Locked On Eagles listeners, they get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, so make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, make sure you also subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis on the bigger games with biggest games, with NFL key predictions every Friday. And Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So, Gino, on yesterday's show, I was kind of talking about how the Eagles might have, compared to the AFC at least, I think they have a very favorable road to the Super Bowl when it comes to potential quarterbacks they'd play. But also, I think there's a good chance, obviously I think most would bet they play either Tampa Bay or Dallas in the divisional round, but Minnesota playing New York, Seattle playing San Francisco. Is there a chance the Giants or Seahawks could win? I think there's a good chance. So we were kind of talking about yesterday the most ideal path for the Birds to get all the way to Arizona. But I kind of want to talk about now the storylines, because I think we would both agree the bigger hyped up game would be compared to Jalen Hurts versus Geno Smith. If you can get round 3 of Eagles-Cowboys at the link this time with both quarterbacks healthy, that hasn't happened either time. It was Cooper Rush for Dallas, then Gardner Minshew for Philadelphia. This historic rivalry that they haven't played on this kind of stage in a very long time. Playoff-wise, you got to go back to 2009, and that was a wild card game. Or even Tampa Bay, that kind of symbolizes like how far the Eagles have come compared to last year when they played Tom Brady. I do feel like storyline-wise, though, playing those top teams would definitely make for, more clicks and better headlines.
Well, I think if we start at the end, let's say that if they play in a Super Bowl against Kansas City or Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
We have to break that news. Folks, if you didn't know this, if Buffalo and Kansas City, this was announced today by the NFL, happen to play in the AFC Championship game, it will not be held in Arrowhead. It will be played in Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta.
So they'd be on the road for 3 straight weeks.
The Eagles would be the only guaranteed team to get to the Super Bowl playing all of their games
just staying at home. Yeah, that's huge.
That in and of itself arguably could be the biggest door that is open for the Philadelphia Eagles in this postseason. But getting back to the beginning of it, storylines, Lou, I think there are a ton of potential great ones. I think the Brock Purdy storyline in particular, because it's kind of going back in time where you're like, that's the Philadelphia Eagles of 2017. They just have this defense that you think you could get by, and enough playmakers that if your quarterback just takes care of the football, you could win a Super Bowl, and they did that. So it has that Nick Foles feel to it.
That's a good point.
Take down the new Nick Foles, let's say, with Jalen Hurts. I think Brian Dable, Nick Sirianni, the Western New York connection, another game that you're going to play between these two. You're going to see Daniel Jones and Jalen Hurts. Can you stop Saquon Barkley? Can the Giants stop Miles Sanders? Two teams built very similarly, but the one that we all want to see, being an MMA guy, I've wanted to see Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz for how many years now, the trilogy. The trilogy is always the best. We haven't seen Jalen versus Dak. Everybody wants to see Jalen versus Dak.
The last time you saw it was week 2 of because even last year, week 18, the Eagles were resting their starters. Mm-hmm. So Hurts didn't play in that game either. The last time this happened where it was Hurts versus Prescott, it was week 2 of 2021. And that team, compared to now, night and day. There's a lot of cool storylines. You could even talk about if the Seattle Seahawks found a way to upset Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. It's kind of the Russell Wilson game where both teams, I feel like, didn't want to lose Russell Wilson, but both teams ended up better for it and would be in the second round of the playoffs while Denver's at home. So there really is, I mean, I guess, especially when you're podcasting addicts like me and you that do this every day, you can find a storyline in any game. But I do think it would be really cool to play, obviously, Dallas for the rivalry story, but like Tampa Bay and even the Super Bowl, the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, I like those games because it's really symbolic of how far the Eagles have come. Like last year, you saw the minute they played an elite quarterback, we knew Jonathan Gannon's defense still not ready. Jalen Hurts, if he's got to throw the ball like he had to, clearly still not ready. And the same thing with Bills and Chiefs, because you watched that game between Allen and Mahomes last year, which was historic. One of the greatest playoff games of all time. And I think both of us were watching that game saying, do we have the horses to be able to hang in this kind of race? And I think the conclusion was no. If the Eagles end up playing one of those teams in the Super Bowl, you know that has completely changed. And I don't think I predicted that to happen in just a calendar year. So that would be cool, symbolism wise, to have it be like the Chiefs rival the matchup, Bills, Tampa Bay. That would be cool as well, just to show how far we've come, especially in the passing game.
I totally agree. And taking down Tom Brady once again.
It'd be beautiful.
I would have,
because you never know how many times you can do it left, man. He's 45. I mean, I know he's going to seemingly play forever, but it would be really cool to beat him twice in the playoffs.
It would be a very interesting and fulfilling 360-degree moment where you went from last year at that exact point in time to a team that you and I said, if there wasn't 7 teams in the playoffs, Philadelphia Eagles aren't even in there. I mean, they had no business being in that playoffs last year. We know that. But this year, you're going to go into that game, and where you were walking in saying you didn't stand a chance, I give Tampa Bay next to no chance.
Yeah, man, it felt like such a massive gap last year. And now this year, you could agree that there's probably a huge gap. It's just in the opposite way. Again, the NFL, we talked about in segment 1 how maximize a window because it might never be the same, but it can be the same in the opposite way where it might never be the same in a positive way.
Without a doubt. Look at the Rams, Lou. I mean, they're in the Super Bowl. The guys win a Super Bowl. Matt Stafford wins a Super Bowl. Sean McVay wins a Super Bowl. Everybody's about to retire now. That whole team is going to a mess. I mean, Tampa could be a Tom Brady retirement away from doing the same exact thing. Bruce Arians leaves. You see what happens there. Who knows if Jerry Jones would be willing to go into another season with Mike McCarthy if this is what the result is year after year. And there are a lot of things the Eagles can play for that are, one, in their control, but two, could drastically affect the future of the National Football League. Because let's get to that Super Bowl, Lou. You're playing Mahomes, Burrow, Allen. Let's say you win that game. We're talking about a future of quarterbacks where everybody's like, oh, what's going to happen after Rodgers, Tom, and Russ and all them are going. It might be potentially better in terms of depth, in terms of stardom, because you now have across both conferences multiple quarterbacks that are elite and have won big time moments, because one of those four teams, in my opinion, is going to win the Super Bowl.
Oh, I agree. And I think, look, beating the greatest quarterback of all time to win your first championship, when that GOAT throws for 500 yards, it's hard to get more satisfying than that when it comes to a Super Bowl win. But I would say because of how envious we were seeing these other teams with these young elite quarterbacks, and we had just lost the guy we thought was going to be the guy for a decade plus in Carson Wentz, and he regressed in historic proportions, and we didn't believe in Jalen Hurts at the time. We didn't think we would get that guy for a long time. If you could beat a Joe Burrow in the Super Bowl, a Josh Allen, a Patrick Mahomes, heck, even a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert, whoever it is, one of those first-round picks that we're seen as generational talents that Jalen Hurts seemed just like not even close to being on that kind of level. If you can beat them, especially if it's an offensive performance, again, it's not as satisfying as beating Tom Brady throwing 500 in your first title win with a backup quarterback, but it's a damn near close second place.
Without a doubt. And we now have the guy. We have the horses. We have the potential to be in that game, because if this conversation is last year, Lou, and we talked about exactly that. We didn't think we could ever get to that point with that team. Outside of just Jalen Hurts, hats off to everybody in that building that has helped that turnaround. In nearly 365 days, this team has gone from a middling 7th seed team to the cream of the crop, the best team in franchise history when it comes to wins, and a team that has the chance to have this offensive output in the playoffs to beat some of the juggernauts. If you look back at the playoffs 2017, you could have played Blake Bortles. There was nobody else really to play. If you're going to win this Super Bowl, Lou, you truly are beating the best of the best, because you're still going to have to beat top-level teams. You're going to have to get through the San Franciscos. It's never easy to beat a divisional rival in the playoffs. This one will feel just as sweet as that first one. Yeah, we popped the cork on that first one, but man, having a second Super Bowl ring,
I agree, man. I've thought about that. I've thought how it'll feel versus, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, divisional wildcard round hasn't even started yet, but you got to think about it when you're the 1 seed. And I thought about how it would feel versus the first title, and the first title will always be the greatest. But I think because of what we went through in 2020 and just where we thought this would never be a reality in 2 years, I think emotionally, me and you, we wear it on our sleeves with this team. But yeah, I think most fans will agree that what we've went through over the past few years would make it that much sweeter. And again, the storylines that you do have, I think this will make for a damn great championship 2022 season. So let's hope it happens. Gino, we'll get into it a little bit more coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. But first, tell us about our friends over at Built Bar.
Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Built Bar. The only thing that would be more satisfying than winning another Super Bowl ring would be doing it while you're munching on a delicious Built Bar. We've been talking about them forever. They've been riding with us since the first Super Bowl season, and there's a reason why. What makes them so good? Well, it's not like you're picking up a piece of chalk and snapping into it. No, they start with 100% real chocolate. It tastes as delicious as your favorite candy bar. They come in flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built Bar does it. I don't ask questions. I just buy these things. They're healthy. They're delicious. only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and you're getting 17 grams of protein. Would you rather eat just a plain old chicken breast to get that protein or a delicious Built Bar that tastes like your favorite candy? You are going to go to Built.com. And I'm telling you that you have to go do this because you are going to regret it if you don't. Go to Built.com or go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Lou, you could walk into a retail store now and get Built Bar.
Yes,
There's nothing better than it. Go to Sam's Club, Walmart, Built.com. Try out a 4-box cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puff, or go to Sam's Club and grab the 13-box. And if you want to order your favorite, always go to Built.com.
All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. He's Gino Camilleri. I'm Lou DiBiase. Getting into some more playoff talk. The Eagles have the week off in the wild card round. They're the number 1 seed in the NFC. The playoffs run through Lincoln Financial Field. They're going to play the lowest seed that survives this round in the NFC. That could be, most people are going to predict either Tampa Bay or Dallas. Maybe the Seahawks upset the 49ers. Maybe the Giants upset the Vikings, and it's Seattle or New York. I think there's a possibility there for sure. The best news, though, is the Eagles just need 2 home wins against probably inferior teams and inferior quarterbacks to get to Arizona and play in the Super Bowl. So cannot wait for that game. The atmosphere at the Link is just going to be electric. Even the last home game, Gino, in 2019 in the playoffs, not going to be like this because that year, even when Carson Wentz, 2 drives in before he got hit by Jadeveon Clowney, they were playing with house money. You were just happy to be there and win that division, to win 4 straight games, just to get in and see Wentz go on that run was exciting. But nobody thought that team had what it took to win a championship. So the last home game you really had with title expectations was 2017.
We all know how that went.
Yeah.
That environment was something I will never forget.
Oh my gosh.
I wish I could have been there, but just hearing
to be there during Dreams and Nightmares and warm-ups would have been one of the coolest experiences ever.
I just remember and will always remember just the rise of the tone in the fans on that Patrick Robinson interception when he got closer. He's scrambling around. He got closer. He got scrambling around, and then he finally does it, that captivating moment that all of us remember. And then we think that's going to be the icing on the cake. The Torrey Smith flea flicker might be one of the most under-talked about plays in Philadelphia.
One of the best throws ever.
Ever. I mean, just on a dime, on a rope, playing with house money. Once again, you get there with a backup quarterback. Lou, you're just talking about how sweet it is to get there. This time around, you have a guy at quarterback. You have a team with this defense, with these playmakers, that isn't just going to fall on the back of one guy. And hopefully Carson Wentz stays healthy to get you through that Seattle game. Or you're hoping that some freak thing could happen to beat the Saints in 2018 where you had to come back after that game. You're not hoping and praying. This is like 2017 where you could dominate.
Yeah, nothing was expected. Even in 2017, Gino, I didn't expect even to beat the Atlanta Falcons. I wasn't like everybody else saying,
once Minnesota hit, I had a good feeling.
But you remember heading into that Atlanta game, they were not looking good. Kind of like the way this season ended. So I agree. I think this is the first time in a long time the playoffs are starting and you're like, I expect them to win this football game and I expect them to get all the way to the Super Bowl because that's how I would have felt in 2017 if Wentz didn't get hurt, but that wasn't the reality. We didn't see elite nuclear Nick Foles until that Minnesota game. So yeah, I think this is that first time in a while and it's going to lead to an electric atmosphere at the Link in a week. Gino, what is, because you live in Colorado, so and me too, like I've never been to a playoff game and I'm not sure if my playoff routine will ever change. What for you, do you have a preference? Does it change per round? We met at the Fillmore for the Super Bowl, so I know you were in Philly for that game, but what is your playoff routine for the Eagles specifically when there is that emotional tie? Are you a stay-at-home guy? Anybody around? Does Jen got to go in the other room?
No, Jen is just as bad as me.
I was going to say, she's
just as bad as me. I remember watching the double doink game with her. She's up on the couch just going absolutely ballistic. But no, absolutely. The first time I ever went to a different location. That's funny you say that.
Was it the Super Bowl?
No, I've watched 2 playoff games, actually 3 playoff games ever, not at my house. First one, Eagles beating Minnesota and Randy Moss in 2004.
Okay, yeah.
Atlanta, 2004, the power goes out at my uncle's house in the third quarter. We had to leave and go back to my house. And then the Super Bowl when I met you. But I got to stay locked in. When it's the playoffs, I honestly am so zoned in. I feel like I'm there. It sounds crazy, but it doesn't.
I don't think anybody listening to the show thinks it's crazy.
I have a great sound system upstairs. The sound bar has been working great for 5 years.
Oh, that's great. The sound system really makes it better.
Oh, man, you just hear that's what I remember it on. I remember the stadium audio the first year. I got it for Christmas. I'm listening to the sound bar. I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever experienced.
My dad had two big amplifiers growing up. I remember the 2010 wild card game. He'd crank it up, and it felt like we were at the link watching Vic. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of a psychopath watching football, especially the Eagles. So I like to be home. I'm kind of a nervous wreck when the playoffs start. So I like to be home for the first game. But the longer you survive and you get to the NFC title, you get to a Super Bowl. We both were probably thinking the same thing. The chance of them losing would be awful, and you drive 6 hours to Philly, maybe you waste all this money. Like, that's the tough part about sports. I mean, you could invest $300 in a playoff ticket and they might get blown out, but the chance of being in Philadelphia and being around a huge group of fans when they win a title, though, is such an incredible opportunity that I feel like it's the same thing now. Probably in the divisional round, I'm going to be locked away by myself. But I think if they get to the NFC title, if they get to the Super Bowl, I think that's when you want to be with the people. And because, I mean, me and you will never forget the Fillmore. I mean, that was the greatest day probably of our lives outside of you probably getting engaged.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree.
I saved you there, buddy. I saved you there.
No, she would agree that was probably the best day of both of our lives.
Yeah, I was going to say, she was there.
She was there. We both got a ring that day. It wasn't just a selfless act by me to give a ring away. But let's hope. Let's hope that they play some great football. And the storylines are all great, and we could talk about all that. But, you know, there's people inside that building that could care less about the storylines because they know there's only one thing that matters, and it's control what you can control. I trust this leadership in this building, especially after this next week when these teams are going to beat the living crap out of each other to get to the next round. The Eagles, fresh, fast, ferocious. Man, get me to next Sunday. I'm ready. We're in the swing of things again in the playoffs. Nothing is better than playoff football in Philadelphia.
You can subscribe to the Locked On Eagles podcast for a show Monday through Friday on all platforms, on YouTube as well. We're going to be talking playoffs all throughout this week and next week leading up to the game in the divisional round. At the link, follow us on Twitter, at LockedOnBirds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Once again, thank you as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast, especially with the playoffs starting this weekend, bringing you the local insight you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your shows. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.